Hello, Blair. Hope you're doing well. I'm going to go over some theory nonsense today, as evidenced by this printout here. And this is all to do with pitch. So, first, I'm going to explain what's going on the piano a little bit, and then I'll come back to this. Um, but basically, oh gosh, how do I even do that? Okay. Western harmony is built a lot on major chords. I think we've done a little bit of ear training with major chords versus minor chords. I can't remember exactly, but a chord is just any time there's more than one note playing at a time or being sung at a time. So like this is not a chord, but this is. And the most common chords are major and minor, and major chords typically sound like happy kind of. And then minor chords typically sound like sad or evil or something. Like that. But today we're going to focus on major chords. There we go. Now, we kind of already know some things about the major chord. For example, we know what intervals make it up because those are the ones we've been studying: the major third, the perfect fifth, and then the octave, which is just the same note again. So it's, you could consider it part of this chord as well if you wanted to. Right, you're just doubling the same note. It doesn't really matter if you add that or not, but the important ones are going to be the major third and the perfect fifth. Right, so the major third we know is do, a deer, a female deer, and we know that the perfect fifth is Star Wars, etc. Sorry, I have to finish that. There we go. Okay. Anyway, so the question is, well, where do these major chords come from? Because I said Western music, but it's actually not just Western music. Every culture, every continent independently arrived at major chords. Actually, if we want to be really specific, they arrived at something called the pentatonic scale, which has those notes, but within that scale is a major chord. So how is it possible that separated by oceans and before telecommunications, every single culture, every single continent kind of arrived at the major chord independently? And the answer is in how vibrations work. In fact, every time you hear any note at all, you're actually hearing a full major chord. And I'll show you what I mean here. It's okay if this doesn't make immediate sense. We'll talk about it more later. But basically, when I play a note, like let's play a low note here. This is a C. Or if I sing a note, we're not just hearing one frequency. I mean, there's strings in the piano, and right, it's vibrating back and forth at some speed, and that's how we determine the pitch. But it's not just vibrating at one speed. It's also vibrating at twice that speed at the same time, which sounds impossible. But again, that's something we'll talk about more later. But for now, you'll just have to trust me that inside the piano, when I play that note, the string is vibrating at, let's say, this is roughly, this is roughly 150 hertz or so. So inside the piano, the string is going back 150 times per second. But it's also going back 300 times per second at the same time. And it's also going 450 times per second, right? It's doing every multiple of the original frequency we mentioned, 150. So it's vibrating at 150 hertz, but also 300 hertz and 450 hertz and 600 hertz and 750 hertz and 900 hertz, right? Every multiple of 150. And that's actually how we can tell the difference in tone. So that's how you know, for example, that even though like I can play a C or I can sing a C, and without looking, you can tell whether I'm singing or playing that C, right? How is that possible? Well, it's because the piano has, a different kind of volume for each of those, what we call overtones, compared to my voice. So we would call 150 hertz the fundamental frequency. And then depending on how strong the overtones are and, which ones are strong, you can tell different tones apart, different qualities apart. So, let's say the piano, I don't know exactly what the makeup is for the piano, but let's say that the piano has, all of the odd numbered overtones are really strong and all the even numbered ones are really weak. Whereas maybe my voice is the opposite. Maybe when I sing, all the even numbered overtones are strong and all the odd numbered ones are weak. And that's how we can tell the difference between two instruments or voices singing or playing the exact same note, right? Because the strength of the extra frequencies that are on top will vary. So how does this relate to a major chord? Well, I'm going to show you exactly what these overtones are. So we have our fundamental frequency here. And like I said, we're not just hearing that one, it's also vibrating twice as fast. Twice as fast makes an octave. So that's somewhere over the rainbow. And then 3 times as fast, so let's say 450 hertz. Right, we're at 150 hertz, 300 hertz, and then 450 hertz, we're going to actually move up a perfect fifth. So that's Star Wars right there. Right? So you can start to see why we've been studying these intervals. And then after that is actually a perfect fourth, and that one we haven't gone over yet. But it's actually just a perfect fifth, but kind of inverted. So if you go the other, if you go instead of C to G, if you go G to C, that's a perfect fourth. We won't worry too much about that though. Point is, we're just doubling a note that we already have. And then finally, so we have 1 time, 2, 3, 4. Then if you multiply the fundamental frequency by 5, which is what, 750, I guess, then you get a major third. So literally, every time we play this note, we're hearing all of these pitches. And it continues on forever, by the way. And the intervals get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But that right there is a major chord. Those are the notes of the major chord. C, E, and G in this case. Okay. So that's how every culture independently arrived at the major chord sounded good, because if you just kind of mess around with different keys, if you go, right, they sound kind of bad until you hit one that's one of those multiples, and you go like, oh, that's quite nice. Like what if we add this one? Ooh, that's quite good, right? They fit well together. So that's how all this. All right. So why do we care about any of this as singers? Well, I'll show you why. A piano, in particular, makes a trade-off. You can play in any key on the piano, right? Every major chord sounds just as good as every other one, but they're all just a little bit out of tune. For example, if this one's 150 hertz, then this one really would be 300, but this one would not quite be 450. This one would be like 461 or something like that. And then like this one would be, like instead of 750, this one would be, 737 and a half or something. So we get these weird ratios, but as singers, we're not bound to that. So this chart shows us how off the piano is basically, and how much we need to adjust our pitch based on where the melody is sitting in the chord. So I'll give you an example here. Let's say we're singing, well, I guess I'll have to show you the anatomy of a chord real quick. We've already talked about it actually, but we need, let's say, these 3 notes. Okay. We usually call this one the 1. We call the major third the 3, unsurprisingly, and we call the perfect fifth the 5. So that's kind of the anatomy of a chord, is we have a 1, a 3, and a 5. 1, 3, and 5, right? We got our bass note, we got Do Deer, and then we have Star Wars, right? So the 1, 3, and the 5 of the chord, right? That's sort of the anatomy. So I'll label them here. We have our 1 would be, I'll circle it and then I'll bring it back into view. Of our 1, our 3, and our 5. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. But you can see we have our 1 here. That's our bass frequency. And then eventually the 3 and the 5 come up here. 3 and the 5. Now, funny enough, the 1 is doubled here. So it might actually be easier to just use these because they're all neighbors. But just know that the 1 appears many times in this list, right? It's doubled many times. So we can actually just focus here. We got our 1, our 3, and our 5. And would you look at that? These notes are off on the piano, which means we can adjust our pitch a little bit. So when we're singing, what this graph is telling us is that when we're singing do, a deer, a female deer, which is between the 1 and the 3 should actually be sung flat on purpose. These units are called cents. And a cent is a percent. It's just short for percent, basically. So if this said minus 100, that would actually mean to lower this a full step down. So from here to here on the piano. If it said minus 50, it would be halfway between here and here, somewhere in the middle. So 14 cents flat. So that means that if we're singing a song and it uses the do a deer one, the major third, if it's using the 3 of the chord, you can sing flat on purpose and it will sound actually more in tune. And you can see that some of them are minus and some of them are plus. So you can imagine that this can get really confusing when you're trying to learn to sing on pitch better, because sometimes you may sound sharp and then you'll correct for that, but then you'll start to sound flat sometimes. And there's no exact middle point really where you can fix all your pitch. You have to know based on the context. So if we go, if I'm going to sing this note, which is the third of the chord, and if I really want it to be in tune, listen to how I sing it, and then I'll play how the piano plays that note, and you'll hopefully will hear the difference. You can see there's just a little bit off from each other, and it's enough to make a difference. So if you're going, do a deer, you're going to want to sing deer just a little bit lower on purpose. On the contrary, if you're singing the Star Wars one, if you're singing the 5 of the chord, bow, bow, you actually want to go just a little bit sharp, only a tiny bit. So realistically, it's okay to just try to sing that exactly as the piano sings. It's only 2 cents sharp. But the point is you do not want to sing this one flat like this one, right? So you'd go, bow, bow. You really want to go right on the pitch. If you go flat, bow, bow, it sounds really terrible. But if you go flat on the 3 instead, bow, bow, it's totally fine. So sometimes you're supposed to go flat and sometimes you're supposed to go sharp. I think realistically, the one that you're going to want to memorize would be the 3, because like I said, the 5 is already really, really close to how the piano does it. The 3 is quite a bit off. The other one that makes a huge difference would be the 7, which we haven't even talked about yet, but I guess I'll circle it. The 7 is supposed to be really flat, almost a third of the way between the note that's written and the one that comes below it. So we'll talk about that more later, but I'm going to quiz you next time on this and make sure you can tell me how many cents flat or sharp the 1, 3, and 5 are. Bonus points if you can remember that 7 is supposed to be 31 cents flat. But definitely we want to know that the 1 should be sung right on pitch, the 3 should be sung 14 cents flat, and the 5 should be sung 2 cents sharp. So we're going to memorize those. Okay, I will stop rambling now. That's my theory nonsense for the day. And if that made no sense, don't worry about it. We'll talk about it more later. But I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.